Superhero Talk Show. I am your host, Brad West, and of course, Miss Anastacia is here with me today, and we're going to wrap up our review of Let There Be Carnage, Venom 2. Alright, so it was fine. So you got all the lowdown this week on the comic book origins. I tried to give you as brief of a history as possible on the animated origins, and we even talked about Venom in other movies. Now we're going to talk about Venom 2, the sequel, with, of course, Carnage.
Yeah.
So, without my obvious thieving input, which is going to happen here in a minute, what was your take on the movie?
That was a lot. That was a lot. That was a lot to have to think about all of a sudden. Because it's like, and yes, I apologize in advance for everybody, because I have literally only known Carnage through a couple of, like, different stories, but not, like... Now, I'm not as terribly invested in this as a lot of people were, so if I hadn't have been briefed with some of these stories beforehand, I probably wouldn't have known what was going on. There was a lot of stuff that they were just like, we know all you nerds are going to this movie, so we don't have to explain anything because you're just going to be able to guess, right? And it's like, so there were some things that, yeah.
If they'd have been consistent about it, if they'd have been like stuff that you could have just Wikipedia'd and understood, that'd have been one thing. If it would have been like, we're just going to go a whole different direction and make everything self-contained where you can figure it out in this movie on your own, that'd be another thing. But I agree with you. I'm not sure who the audience was in the long run.
Yeah. It's like...
Because it was not pleasing to the longtime fans.
It was a very divisive film.
It was very much so. I mean, more so than the first one was. I mean, the first one, you had to have Spider-Man, or Venom without Spider-Man. That was fine. Because Carnage theoretically should have worked without... Once you got Venom without Spider-Man out of the way, Carnage and Venom should have worked fine without Spider-Man.
Yeah, because that's not the relationship issue.
Yeah.
It's like it's like his beef is with Eddie Brock.
Yes.
So we can do him without it having to link back to Spider-Man.
Yeah. And it should have worked. But I didn't even know what I was watching.
That was it. Well, and the only thing I could give it's like, it's kind of a double-edged sword because it still hits the vibe I enjoy. The problem is, and this is a thing I complain about with all of these, is that with horror characters, I'm cool with it being a rated R. And a lot of punches got pulled, and I get it, it doesn't need to be excessively gory, but I'm like, this is a gory character.
So, let's talk about the rating when we talk about the end credit stingers. And by the way, y'all, this is going to be super spoilery, so...
Yeah, we're just talking about it.
There's no holding this back. I have been like,
we had to cry about a lot of this.
Oh, I was there with like half a dozen friends, and all of them were like patting me on the back. They're like, I'm like, I was catatonic. I mean, I needed to be guided down the stairs. I was like,
he was inconsolable by the end of this.
Oh, wow. It just made me so mad on so many levels.
There was a lot of shock on my face.
I agree with Greg, though. This very much feels like a just shameless cash grab. It's like you said, there's so many good Carnage stories and everything. I don't think they really cared. I think they were cared about flash over substance. They're like, this movie's going to make money anyway. People are going to go see it. We're desperate to see our superhero stuff right now. And as long as we get something out there that gives us an excuse to slap that red symbiote on every piece of freaking merchandise. I mean, even the Lego faces. There's 2 Lego sets, Venom and Carnage out. Like, why is it not a Spider-Man head? No, it's a Venom and Carnage model headpiece on Lego. It's just an excuse to sell Venom and Carnage merch. It's shameless.
Which is fine, because at least for me, like, these are not movies I come in with the expectation to be good. Like, I expect them to be, like, B horror schlock.
You know, I would have even loved it if it was B horror schlock.
Yeah, like, it's supposed to...
That would have been actually an interesting take. Because that's one of the things I said a minute ago. Is unfortunately, I feel like, you know, this wasn't... I think this was somebody in Sony's, like, writing room going, we are trying to copy the success of a Marvel film.
And a couple of other things, but they keep pulling their punches.
Exactly. Well, the Marvel films... One of the formula success for them is that they diversify. They try to make different movies. Yes, they have a basic blueprint, which is fine. But, you know, Ant-Man, of course, is your heist movie. And Captain America is your political thriller movie. And,
right?
You know,
there's a genre for everybody.
There's a genre for everything. So if they'd have actually made the Venom movies like cheesy sci-fi monster schlock...
They should have been.
That would have been amazing. Like, I just rewatched Arachnophobia last night, and I forgot how much that takes from old 50s horror movies. You know, I mean, it was more, you know, they were using the spiders instead of the alien invasion kind of thing. But, you know, you had that, like, that kind of, you know, creepy things in the closet, the unknown or whatever. If they'd have actually had Carnage as a serial killer... And not just this overpowered... I mean, the furthest that they went with his serial killerness is that he didn't have any qualms about killing. That's fine.
And the very obvious thing that I'm like, okay, whatever. Because they made it a family-friendly movie, but they were like, we're going to make all these natural-born killer references.
Oh, yeah.
Because we have to.
With the car, we both looked at each other and I'm like... So it was like beat for beat. And convertible.
She's doing the hooting, she's doing the hollering. He's sitting there just like, yeah, I understand what movie I'm in. And I'm just, it's one of those things where it's like, yeah, whenever you have a character, literally the lead from Natural Born Killers, I'm like, I would have been cool with it if it literally was just Natural Born Killers, but with
supervillains.
With superheroes in it. It's like, I'm cool with that. But the problem is that because of the twists we will talk about later, they were ready. Like, I spent the last year being told, these next movies are going to be rated R. You guys are going to get your first year of rated R superhero movies. And then suddenly at the very last minute I see, oh, it's PG-13. Why is it PG-13?
All right. So for the, you know, we'll go ahead and give you that spoiler real quick. So the reason that they're PG-13 is because Marvel, and this is like kind of low on Marvel's part, and I was like, whatever. But then I guess it paid off. They told Sony when Venom 1 came out, if no guarantees, not when, if you ever hope to cross over into our universe, you can't make them rated R. And they're like, we're not guaranteeing we will. We probably won't. But if. And so Sony was like, okay, fine. So it was like, fine. Well, then, of course, now that's what's going to happen. I'm not happy about it. I'm not looking forward to it.
Right.
I know. It's like, you know, you would think, what, Brad? You love Spider-Man. And you love Venom as a Spider-Man villain. I'm like, that ship has sailed. I do not want this Venom in this Spider-Man world. I just don't.
Well, and the problem is, and this is a thing people keep missing, what I'm getting annoyed with is literally, what was the thing we complained about when Spider-Man 3 came out? Mm-hmm. There's too much happening.
And now it's like,
and now
all of a sudden, that's why everybody keeps going like, ooh, we're going to have Spider-Verse, and Peter's going to interact with Maguire and Garfield. I'm like, no, please, for the love of God, no. Shut up, you don't know what you're asking.
Right? He already has to deal with the entire Sinister Six in this movie. All of them. And I already have to deal with the side story of him fighting Doctor Strange because Doctor Strange is like, stop being a wuss. To stop being a wuss and just either commit to being Spider-Man or not.
Right.
It's like, we already have that to work with for, 2 hours? And now we're like, oh, by the way, Venom's going to be there.
And by the way, Venom's going to be there.
How many times do we have to teach you this lesson, old man?
Right. Exactly.
I'm so... Like, it was...
You should know better by now, Sony. You should just
Like, for what it's worth, I was surprised.
Yeah,
that was a stinger. I was surprised.
It was a surprise.
While everyone else was cheering, like, he heard me. He heard me straight up go, oh no.
Oh, no, that whole theater heard my heartbreak. It was just like, I was like...
That was the moment I genuinely, like, all they hear is... Yeah, they hear me go, oh no, and then I looked at you and you're inconsolable. He was like, no.
All right, let's just pretend like it doesn't connect to anything else, and let's forget the history in the comic books. I'm gonna judge this based on the merit of the movie on its own.
Oh, please no.
Okay, the humor was so bad. It was so bad.
They dragged things out longer than they did.
They did. It's like, yes, we get the joke, move on. Okay. Like
they could have, there are jokes that pretty much, I'm like, okay, yes, I will admit, this was funny. And then they kept going with it, and then it kept going too long, and I'm like, that's enough. We can keep going. We can stop. Like,
character development. All right, this is my biggest complaint about the first one, is that there were no consequences for Eddie by the end of that frickin' movie.
Were there any consequences for this?
In the end of the first movie, yes, at least this time there were. But at the end of the first movie, it's just like, oh, he's a terrible person. He bonds with an alien terrible person.
But
they're both losers. But in the end, his ex, who really should have just not had anything to do with his ass, helps him, which, okay, I'm like...
She deserves way better.
If she helps him because she's a compassionate person, that's one thing, but then, like, what, they're friends now? So, it's like, yeah, he's never gonna win her back, but at least they're friends, and his career is saved, and now he's got this interview with this famous serial killer, and so now he's gonna have an even better career. That was kind of screwed up. And so then this movie starts off where he's even better, where he's, like, making money, he's got the big TV, he's a famous journalist again. I'm like, what the hell? This should never be a thing, and has never been a thing in the comic books.
Right?
Once Eddie Brock screwed up his career, it was done.
Eddie was supposed to be a loser and stay a loser.
And stay a loser. So, even when he was an anti-hero, that never happened. So, that really bugged me. And some of the relationships made no sense. Okay.
There was a lot of confusion. Yeah.
Shriek.
She got robbed.
They totally...
So mad.
If I didn't understand, and this is what I'm thinking from, like, standing on its own, if I had gone in there not knowing this, I would be completely confused because her character makes no sense. Because we already established in the first movie, and then they reintegrate it here in the second movie, is that one of the only weaknesses they have is sound and fire. There's loud sounds and fire. And so why do we have a character whose power is super loud sounds? In the comic book, it makes sense. Cletus manipulates her into thinking that he loves her so that she will follow him, and he specifically uses her as a weapon against Venom. He knows that that's the weakness, and in the comic book, she never uses that power on him until, of course, she figures out that he's, manipulating her. But regardless, up until that point, he uses her for that power to fight Venom. Second, the main thing that makes Cletus different than Eddie and the symbiote is the fact that the symbiote and Eddie are symbiotic, whereas Cletus is 100% dominant over the symbiote. The symbiote has
there's real terms for this.
The symbiote has no personality or consciousness.
He is not a separate person.
It is not a separate person the way that Venom and Eddie are. It is completely 100%, and that's what makes it so dangerous, is because he doesn't have to bond with it. He doesn't have to fight it. He doesn't have to struggle. He doesn't have anything holding him back. That's what makes Carnage so much...
That's what makes him terrifying.
Terrifying.
It's basically Cletus just with powers.
It's just Cletus with powers. And so giving the symbiote its own personality, A, having it in conflict with Cletus makes no damn sense.
It's so dumb.
And then B, only to have him, like, every time Shriek uses her powers, shut up!
Yeah.
Shut her up!
Why would you have a character that has sound powers that literally all you're you have this character with really cool powers that can be used. But nobody wants her to use them. She uses them for 2 seconds, and then they're like, no, shut up.
I wouldn't have even been able to deal with the symbiote having its own personality and going, ooh, let's use her to fight Venom. No. Shut her out because her powers hurt me too. And I'm like,
and what's confusing for me is that at least when I think of things like, because when I think of other characters with those powers, like the reason they show her powers as they do is because it's a directed power. So it's like, why would you have? It's like, but they have instances where they're like, oh, because even though she is
screaming this way,
it's hurting him.
Yeah,
and I'm like, that doesn't make any. Or well, I get why you feel like you have to do it for this story, but don't do that then. It's like, why is she even here?
Mm-hmm.
Like, which is sad because she's such a cool character, and there's so many ways that you could have used that manipulation.
And I felt stupid. I'm like, and why does she look like the witch from Pirates of the Caribbean? And then Tyler, he's like, that's because she is the witch from Pirates of the Caribbean.
Yeah, she is the witch from Pirates of the Caribbean.
Okay, fine.
That's okay. It took me like a week. Somebody had to post that, and I was like, oh my god, it's the same girl? That's why I think she's hot. Okay.
I know. And well, yeah, right? But the thing is like, okay, and her hair, I was telling you this one. Her hair was on point. But like,
it was so
who
good.
was doing her hair?
Right? I mean, if you are trapped there by yourself and you are not allowed to have any other interactions with things, just after a while, the only thing you can do
is your hair, I guess. that's fine.
It looks so and it looks so good. And for some reason, of all the logical inconsistencies that happened in this movie, that was the way she gets her eye was the only one that I was like, yeah, okay.
Yeah, sure.
That's fine.
Which you had to have something to look. I mean, obviously they couldn't copy the look of the comic book very much, so giving some kind of an aspect of it, it was an interesting take. I liked it.
Right? Like, logistically, to me, that is not a thing that happens if you get shot in your eye.
But you know what? It's like like Domino in the Deadpool 2. It's like, the vitiligo was such a creative way of capturing the essence of that birthmark, but having a real world kind of way. And so you get a look, and you get something, okay, this is Domino, without being a literal translation. And so I think that was kind of like what they were trying to do, is it's like, you know what, let's give her something that gives her that Shriek aspect without a literal translation.
And she looks good.
And she looks good. She looks really cool.
Like, she did, like, there were a lot of bits of it that, like, honestly, I understand why they made the direction in the way that it was, but they probably could have cut her out of the story, and it still would have.
Well, yeah, because that's like I said, she was there because she was in the comic book.
Well, and what it makes me think is happening is because of how like powerful Carnage can be, they basically had to do things to systemically like nerf his powers. Like, be like, oh, they're not symbiotic. It's like, oh, this is a character that doesn't have to worry about being symbiotic with this other character. Fine, we'll make him two separate entities. Oh, he has somebody that he can use as a weapon against Venom. Well, instead, we're going to make it hurt him too.
Mm.
Like, we had to do things to make him less powerful, to make the story work, even though I'm like, there's plenty of stories where they had to figure out how to beat him.
Yeah. Well, that's another thing, though. You're right. Now that you think about it, it's like they were so inconsistent about the representation of their powers too. It's like, this is one thing. This is one thing that the first Venom movie bugged me, and it was just even more to the point in this one. Is Venom, the symbiote, does not live inside of him. It does not live inside of him. Venom symbiote lives on top of, outside of its host.
He's literally a suit.
He's literally a suit who can shapeshift and therefore can take on the form of clothes. And so it will look like his street clothes. Like, literally, when it's not the suit, it's his clothes.
Right.
That's what it's supposed to look like.
Which is why when he comes into, like, the grocery store or something, it, like, whenever they show Venom, he's, like, sticking out of his back or something. Yeah. That's where he's hiding. He's just his clothes.
He's just his clothes. What's this what's supposed to be, or whatever. The thing with with Carnage, Carnage actually is inside of him because
he's connected to the blood.
He's connected to the blood. He literally, the symbiote is so ingrained into Cletus that it replaces his blood. It lives in his veins. In fact, one of my favorite comics is when somebody tries to inject Cletus with a lethal injection, and he's like, "Yeah, I have a monster in my blood," and they don't realize that he's still got traces of the symbiote that is rebuilt into his bloodstream. It was really cool. So it's another one of those really freaky scenes, like you're saying, that would be great in a horror setting movie,
right? Well, and that's when I started getting confused, because they played it up so much in the trailer when he's about to get the injection and suddenly everything goes wrong.
Right.
And I'm like, guys, I'm not expecting a lot of excess gore, but when you have a serial killer who just had a super powerful blood symbiote activate in him, and he's dealing with this stuff,
doesn't slaughter everybody there.
Yeah, like I at minimum expect the walls
to be splattered, yes,
to be painted with blood.
Well, and then also, okay, so two things. One is they are so inconsistent about his powers. I mean, we want to talk about just like
there's
stretching.
A lot of moments where you're like, why? But why can he do that? But
there's a couple of cool things that Venom did that I'm like, okay, like Venom seeing something that Eddie didn't and then drawing it for him. I'm okay with that. Even Venom taking control of Eddie's hands to draw faster and something, I'm okay with that too.
I was cool with that.
It was interesting take on the powers and everything. Like I said, there's no consistency with some of the other stuff, but that would work. But then here's Cletus, who is making hurricanes and has absolutely no limitations of mass. Like he's like
he could be whatever size he wants.
He's several stories high at one point.
Yep.
Like there's so much of him holding up that car in that one scene where it's just like, in any other instance of the comic book, he would have been completely stretched himself. That's one of the things that bugs me about the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Everything. There's no mass consistency. I'm tired of them just going, oh, it's nanobots and it all fits in my fingernail or whatever. And it's the same thing with Carnage. Is like, where does that mass come from? It has to come and go somewhere. It's like I remember talking about Mystique. It bugs me with Mystique. In the comic book, Mystique can make herself a little bit bigger because she
can be like a bulkier.
She can look bigger because she can put air pockets inside of herself. She can expand her lungs bigger and stuff like that. She can distance her own mass to make it look bigger, or she can be a little bit smaller by compacting her mass.
Right.
But like in the one, what was the one with Peter Dinklage, and she turned into Peter Dinklage. In the comic book, she couldn't do that. In the comic book, she could not make herself somebody that small because she could not compact her mass that small.
That much, yeah.
You know what I mean?
Uh-huh.
And she's limited to how much bigger she can get because she can't extend her mass that much without losing control. And that's the thing with Carnage. Is like once you, it's like has anybody ever played with slime? After a while, when you it just falls apart.
Well, and I'm thinking actually. This is a convenient connection because I was watching an anime called Dead Man Wonderland, and it is a thing where you can turn your blood into weapons. But the problem is that the more you expel your blood and the more you make big weapons, the weaker you get because you only have so much blood in your body.
Yeah.
So it's one of those, like, there's ways to give him limitations, but it wasn't that.
It wasn't that, yeah.
Like, making it so he could be whatever size he felt like, that was like, why?
At that point...
Without, like, killing Cletus.
Yeah, how was he defeated then? It was too much. It was too much. And
right.
So,
it's like, but yeah, we have the contrast where it's like, okay, Eddie needs to find out this information. So, it's like, at some point, he goes to Cletus's cell, looks casually at Cletus's cell, gets back, Venom's like, you idiot. Did you not see this thing? And instead, he makes him draw several pictures, and then he's like, I'm going to make you type out this thing, and then compare the picture. Versus Cletus, who was like,
ooh, does this have the internet?
Yeah, like, he walks in, and he's like, I've never used the internet before, and then he just puts his hand in there, And not only is he able to look things up, which I was like, cool, he can at least look things up, he is able to hack into a secure system, like a
and change the color of the screen to conveniently be red.
Yeah, which I was like, wait, what are you talking about? Why aren't there rules?
There weren't rules. There weren't. They didn't even explain anything. Like, if they would have explained some of the rules, I was like, okay, for instance, Venom doesn't actually see Carnage until the final battle. And then all of a sudden, oh, it's worse than I thought because he's a red one. Okay.
Yeah, and I'm like, what does that mean?
What does that mean? Like, that doesn't mean anything in the comic book.
Yeah, that was a I don't understand what
like,
you're talking about.
Even if they would have said, for the movie universe, oh, well, on my planet, the red ones are the crazy ones or whatever, deadlier, fine. Maybe they should have said that.
Dumb it down for me, please.
That we would all assume that the red one meant something, because it doesn't really mean anything. He just happens to be red in the comic book, because, the artist was like, it would be different than black, but whatever.
Right, well, and the problem is that they don't establish those rules, like, in the movie continuity. Because if they didn't have a whole entire other movie where he deals with other symbiotes...
Right.
I'm like, for him to be like, that's a red one. And I'm like, what are you talking about?
Remember,
what is that?
In the first movie, did he change clothes? Didn't Eddie at some point, didn't the suit end up like... It did! Because remember in the plaza, when the security force was attacking him, didn't he escape by dressing like one of the security men?
I thought so, yeah. Yeah, I think so.
So they do the clothing thing.
Yeah.
Or at least they did, but they didn't do it at all in this.
No, the only time he does is when he's going through the little corner store. And, Mrs. Chen was like, hello, Venom, and he pops out from behind his, the little tentacle pops out, like, hello.
Huh.
Yeah, that's literally the only time I think I've seen that happen. But in, an actual espionage thing, it doesn't happen. I think
in the first movie, they had him be on the outside, but this one definitely, and Andy Serkis directed this one.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and I'm like, did you watch the first movie?
Well, and it's confusing it's like the other confusing thing for me, because again, I'm still incredibly bitter this was not an R rating.
Mm.
This should have been.
Mm.
Not that the stuff was so messed up it should have been, but the character it's a messed up character. Like, I should fear for everybody's lives.
Yeah, it should have been scarier, and it just came out cartoonish. It was a caricature.
Yeah, it's like, so there's a lot of instances where it's like, oh, okay, so you're perfectly fine with, beating this rando kid at a corner store for no reason so you can get onto the internet, but I'm like, you mean to tell you just took down an entire prison? You took down an entire prison. Guards, all of them. You just broke your girlfriend out of a maximum security prison.
He did kill that one doctor.
Yeah, and he killed the doctor that ran the whole prison and just raised Cain all the way out. So you mean to because there were points where I was like, oh my god, this is so terrifying. He's gonna show up to the police station.
Uh-huh.
And he's just gonna be like, I want my girlfriend back, and just start raising Cain there, and it never happens.
No.
Literally, we have one human character that I was 100% like, you are going to die. I accepted that he was going to die, and there was literally no risk.
Well, you know what? I forgot. I didn't. Okay, so I knew that he was the same. I knew he was the same guy from the beginning. I knew he was the same guy from the beginning that Shriek busted his eardrum because he was wearing the hearing aid at the end of it. Yeah. I knew he was the same guy. I knew he was going to be connected to that. I was familiar with the character of Toxin, who is basically Carnage's son, offspring. I was familiar with the character of Toxin. He'd shown up in a couple of Spider-Man stories that I'd read, but I'd never read his origins, so I didn't remember anything outside of the fact that...
Yeah, and I straight up just didn't know. I was sitting there just like...
I didn't remember anything outside of the fact that he was a cop, and that he was the first symbiote that Spider-Man considered an ally at the very least. And so I didn't know the name of the cop, so I didn't realize it was that cop. So at the end, when he's all like, oh, and then you see that he's got the thing, and I'm like, oh, he must be Toxin.
Yeah, because that was the other time I literally looked at you like, what? And you're like, oh, that's supposed to be Toxin.
No, I said, I think that's Toxin.
It's like...
I wasn't that confident. I'm like, toxin?
Yeah.
That's the only thing it could be in my head at the time, which we have since confirmed.
Yes, they've been like, yes, it's toxin.
It is, so.
It's like, but that was another one that was confusing for me, because, like, literally, I don't need you to spell this out for me like I'm a child. But I kind of need you to put the context in the movie, because as many times as they're like, these are for the nerds who love and are obsessed with these movies. No, you've got to understand, a modern superhero audience is people that are new to this stuff.
Yes, yes.
So yes, you can have Easter eggs. Like, I accepted. Okay, that's cool. They're trying to bring in a new symbiote. But when did this happen?
Yeah,
like,
and it's a horse before the cart kind of situation, and I understand why a lot of directors of this stuff, like even Joss Whedon, when he did the first Avengers, he went out of his way to not put Easter eggs because he's like, I don't want to alienate the audience. This is a new audience, you know. Easter eggs are something for other directors and other things. I'm trying to get like 5 superheroes mushed together in one. You know, let's trim that down and make it as unconfusing, because they have to have seen these other movies to begin with already, much less know what the continuity is for the comic books. So, you know, Easter eggs should always be gravy. They should not be the meat.
Right, and it's like, I'm cool with them adding stuff as long as they set up the rules, which they tried to. They were like, okay, so we have these symbiotes, but we just told you in this movie that you can make new symbiotes. Like, all you have to do is have some sort of blood or something transferred.
They didn't actually explain why, and that's another thing. You know, no, they didn't. They didn't explain anything. There's still no explanation where Carnage actually came from. Like, even if they would have been like,
guess.
It's like, it can't be, it's got to be more than just blood transfer, because, I'm sorry, like, Venom was getting all up in people in the first movie. He would have, like, made 100, like, just by the number of people that he stabbed through the gut and stuff like that, you know, it's like, there's blood connection there. Anybody who even remotely survived should be a symbiote by now. That's not it. But I was hoping maybe they would explain that there was a chemical reaction, like, maybe, you know, the lethal injection mixed with the symbiote created another symbiote or something.
Well, and then he actively ate the blood. Like, he did. It wasn't like they showed the first half of the scene where he, like, grabs his arm and bites him, and bites his hand. But,
you know, at least the trailer doesn't show, because you were right. He shouldn't have been able to get bit, but the movie actually, okay, I get why he managed to get the upper hand on him.
Right, it's still dumb, but it makes a little more sense.
Yeah, at least I'm like, okay, I see where he got him bit. I see where he bit him. That works. But yeah, and no, you're right. And then he's like, oh, that's not blood. That's something better.
Yeah, he's like, because he's an easy character that you can make him be like, wham, crazy.
Yeah, I know, but he should have been more than just wham, crazy. He should have been more like Hannibal Lecter disturbing crazy. You know what I mean?
Yeah, like he should be a little more calculated than he is.
And that's where I feel that Woody Harrelson was just not the right choice.
Well, and it's I get why they put him in there, but at this point I'm like, okay, I've had enough.
But if they'd have put him in a movie like even 10 years ago, it might have been a little, but now it's just like, no, it needs to be somebody fresh. Somebody fresh.
And his problem, God bless him, is he's one of those, once you've seen him, you've seen everything.
Yeah.
Like I've seen Natural Born Killers.
He's got like 3 movies. He's got like his crazy bad guy, his crazy good guy, and then his quirky somewhere in between guy. That's it.
Yeah. Well, and it was one of those things, I felt so bad. His facial expressions kill me. It's like, he has 2 very distracting issues. One is that everyone wants to put him in hair, and it looks dumb. There has not been
at least it was better than the hair at the end of Venom 1.
Right, but the problem is that we just shouldn't put Woody Harrelson in hair.
Oh, it cracked me up, because, like, you know, he in the comic book, he has this crazy wild hair, and so, like, in the first Venom, when they tried putting him in, like, the crazy, and it just looked like a freaking clown wig. It looked like a clown wig. And then this one, I don't know. It was
so
not
dumb.
It was dumb, but it was so much better than the curly red wig.
Right? We went from a D paper to a C paper.
Yeah.
It's fine. It's like, but
it's you passed. You passed. But
right? But his other thing now is that he can't do scary expressions to save his life anymore. And maybe it's just because I'm desensitized to it because I've seen all of his scary movies. But yeah, it's like, because they have shots where I'm like, this would be a beautiful shot. We could throw this in a poster.
Right.
Like the thing where they're at the altar, like he and Shriek are at the altar,
Yes.
and they're both looking at him. Like, and it's big, intimidating face. I'm like, that would make a cool poster. But the problem is that the actress who plays Shriek is very good at playing scary.
Mm-hmm.
Like, she's very good at playing intimidating. She has a great, like, I'm powerful and scary face. Woody Harrelson does not. And maybe it's because I am unfortunately young enough that my brain's like, that's Grandpa.
And then did anything make you any more comfortable than when they were uncomfortable? When they were making out? Because it was like...
Yeah, like, it was one of those things where I'm just like...
She's like... I'm sorry.
I know, it's... And they have moments where it's just like, the humor... Basically, they get the humor 90% of the way. Like, they're getting too far in the wacky side, and I'm just like, please don't.
Please don't.
Like,
and then they do something wacky.
Yeah, like, the one that I told him I nearly walked out on, because I was like, I would not be able to take this. They have the weird scene where Venom has his breakup story. They have their dramatic thing.
Yes.
And he decides he wants to compensate by going to party somewhere.
Oh my god, the party. Oh, and then they're using that for the promo images now too, and I'm like, oh, if you only knew the context.
Right? I don't like it because they're sitting there because it's like it's like the singer in the party is singing the Venom rap,
the Eminem rap.
Yeah, she's singing it, and I'm like, that's fine. It's kind of dumb, but whatever. It's like, because again, I didn't walk in here expecting this to be a good movie. Like,
it's certainly not Oscar bait.
It's a very genre specific thing that I'm like, yeah, sure, fine. It's like, but then he grabs the microphone from her. And
Anna's like, so help me God if he starts rapping. If he starts rapping.
I was sitting there in near tears. Because yeah, I mean he has his weird gay allegory speech. Which I was like, okay, whatever. But I'm basically waiting for him to rap because that wouldn't have been out of character for this movie. I was sitting there like, for the love of God, if he starts singing or rapping or any of that, I'm leaving.
I actually call bullcrap on some of those people like, oh my God, your costume is so lifelike and wonderful. And I'm like, dude,
I would have noticed that was
I would have noticed something was up. No.
Like, he's a professional costumer.
No. We do this stuff. We've been doing this for years, and I have seen some cosplays that will, like, floor you, but not a one would ever have, like, that would require, like, a full, like I was told, you'd have to have the entire Jim Henson team in your head, animatronics, moving that stuff to even remotely come close to that level of articulation.
Yeah.
So there's just like, there's nothing in the world that I would be on the street and I would see this and go, great
even
costume,
high.
Man. Even high. Yeah. Even high. I'd be like,
it would be worse if I'm high, because my brain would have been like, that's a demon.
Yes.
Like immediately would have gone towards that's a demon. Because then he also had to, he keeps his scary, scraggly voice. So it's like, yeah, do I admit that there's probably someone just dumb enough to, like, believe that that's a costume? But odds are, in that room full of crowded people, someone would have been like...
Somebody. Exactly. And then they kept him so disproportionate, too. Because even, like I said...
He's so tall!
He's so much bigger than the first movie compared
to... It never occurred to me he was so tall.
He wasn't. In the first one, he was not that big compared to people. I mean, he was big, and he was hulking, of course... But, like, I would say he was maybe around 7 feet, which is plenty big. But in this, he was well over 8 feet tall.
Yeah, he was huge. Like, he was towering over everybody, which is what confused me. Because I'm like, he can change his, because if he can change his shape, I'm like, why would you not at least make yourself look shorter to everybody? Like, technically, yes, you don't, it's like, I get what the on-off switch looks like. If it's Venom, it's on. If it's the people, it's off. But I'm like, you mean to tell me you couldn't, like, yeah, because it never occurred to me that, yes, he did take the shape of somebody at some point.
Yeah.
So it's like, you couldn't have taken a shape to somebody to blend in? Like, you mean to tell me you were able to look like that driving all the way to this club, and that was fine?
And that was fine.
That was it. That was fine?
Okay, so anyway, thank you for joining us on the Red Web and our review of Venom. We hope you found it. You know what? It was entertaining. I mean, we got some.
Right, I had fun.
We had fun.
It would be one I'd watch again.
You know, now that the shock has worn off, because I was shell shocked. I'm not gonna lie.
I was genuinely shocked. Yeah.
Bo couldn't make it. My husband could not make it with us. And when I came home, he was like, let me put you to bed. It's just like, I needed to be consoled. I'm like, where's my puppy? I need to pet my puppy.
It was yeah.
It was pretty, oh my God. So, you know, now looking back, it's, we can laugh about it.
Right.
All right. So, this has been the Red Web. Make sure you, like, subscribe, follow, and check us out on bradsredweb.com for future installments. We got a whole bunch of great stuff coming up for you for the fall. I think, what are we going to do? What do you decide we're going to do for Halloween? Spawn, right?
I want to do Spawn.
We're going to do Spawn.
We'll do Spawn.
Spawn's going to be on our Halloween docket. I'm going to be talking about clones soon, so that one's going to be a big mess.
That's going to be confusing.
It's going to be confusing, but we're going to make it fun because it's like a huge thing. And we love you. Follow the show, and we'll see you next time on the Red Web.
All right, bye-bye, guys.